And a very warm welcome. You're watching India Today's special continuing coverage of Modinomics 24. Through the day today, India Today's coverage has been a super smash hit. All the other English news channels put together could not compete with the kind of live concurrent traction that India Today was generating, so much so that we were beating all the Hindi channels as well. So first and foremost, as we start our coverage, from our entire team to all our viewers, a big thank you. On this broadcast, we'll have several senior ministers of the Union Cabinet joining us. We'll have Minister Ashwini Vaishnav, Jyotiraditya Scindia, Rajiv Chandrasekhar. For points of view from the opposition, we'll have P. Chidambaram joining us in just a few moments from now. He's made 9 union budgets, so some of the biggest voices from India Inc., from the government and from the opposition will be joining me on this special post-budget broadcast. Here are the headlines I'm tracking tonight. Finance Minister raises capex spend to a record 11.1 trillion rupees in the interim budget. No changes in direct or indirect taxes.
ये बजट विकसित भारत के 4 स्तंभ युवा, गरीब, महिला और किसान सभी को एम्पावर करेगा.
Jharkhand government in crisis after Hemant Soren's arrest. 22 hours on. Chief Minister successor Champai Soren yet to take over. JMM Congress released a video of 43 MLAs in support of Champai Soren. Hyderabad resort ready to prevent poaching. Hemant Soren to spend the night behind bars after being presented in a PMLA court. ED seeks 10 days custody, says Soren knowingly used scam money. Hours after Varanasi court ordered unsealing of the Gyanvapi mosque basement, puja performed in the mosque complex. Muslim side appeals to the High Court. Tractors line up the streets of Brussels as farmers surround the EU Parliament. Farmer protests rage across France, Germany, Italy, Poland and Hungary. Government's capital expenditure on public projects increased to a record 11.1 trillion rupees, a massive push on infrastructure. The government wants to lay a foundation for a Viksit Bharat by 2047. In a few moments from now, as I said, some of the top newsmakers will be joining me from the government, from the opposition and from India Inc. to talk about this budget. But before all of that, let me take you through the government's key thrust areas: Gyan, Garib, Yuva, Annadata and Nari. That was the Finance Minister's thrust in her 6th budget. Take a look at this and then we'll get started with all the heavy-duty speakers from the government and the opposition and from India Inc. will be joining me on the broadcast.
An interim budget with no doles, no major announcements in an election year. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman highlighted the government's economic achievements during the past 10 years in an hour-long speech. Stating how the nation had transformed into one of the fastest growing economies in the world, the Finance Minister claimed the government's focus was on Garib, Yuva, Annadata and Nari, or Gyan in short.
Their needs, their aspirations and their welfare are our highest priority. The country progresses when they progress. All 4 require and receive government support in their quest to better their lives. Their empowerment and well-being will drive the country forward.
The interim budget promised 2 crore more houses under the PM Awas Yojana over the next 5 years. She said 78 lakh street vendors have been provided credit assistance. The Finance Minister highlighted DBT transfer of 34 lakh crore rupees to beneficiaries and free ration for 80 crore people.
To help deserving sections of the middle class, and I quote from Honourable Prime Minister's words, living in rented houses or slums or chawls and unauthorized colonies, unquote, to buy and build, to buy or build their own houses.
For the youth, the finance minister stated the government has set up 7 IITs, 16 IIITs, 7 IIMs, 15 AIIMS, 390 universities. 43 crore loans have been sanctioned to boost the youth of India. 1.4 crore youth were trained for skill upgrade, and 50-year interest-free loans for investment in sunrise domains was announced that will benefit the private sector.
The corpus will provide long-term financing or refinancing with long tenors and low or nil interest rates. This will encourage the private sector to scale up research and innovation significantly in sunrise domains. We need to have programs that combine the powers of our youth and technology.
The finance minister said 11.8 crore direct financial assistance has been provided to farmers under the Prime Minister Kisan Yojana. Crop insurance given to 4 crore farmers and integration of 1,361 mandis under ENAM were also the key highlights.
Several other programs are assisting Annadata in producing food for the country and for the world. Electronic National Agricultural Market has integrated 1,361 mandis and is providing services to 1.8 crore farmers with trading volume of 3 lakh crores of rupees.
Further, government is enhancing the target for Lakpati Didi scheme to 3 crore from 2 crore. The finance minister also highlighted that 30 crore Mudra Yojana loans have been given to women in the last 10 years. The centre also announced that Ayushman Bharat scheme would be extended to all Asha and Anganwadi workers. The government will also encourage vaccination of girls in the age group of 9 to 14 years to prevent cervical cancer.
Lakpati Didi, 83 lakh SHGs. 83 lakh SHGs with 9 crore women are transforming rural socio-economic landscape. It has been decided to enhance the target for Lakpati Didi from 2 crores to 3 crores.
An interim budget without any big announcements is a sign Prime Minister Narendra Modi is confident of retaining power after the 2024 Lok Sabha elections. Nirmala Sitharaman in fact exuded confidence she will present the full budget in July.
In the full budget in July, Honourable Speaker, our government will present a detailed roadmap for our pursuit of Vikasit Bharat.
Bureau Report, India Today.
Okay, joining us now at this time is a man who's made 9 budgets, P. Chidambaram. We've been hearing all day from senior ministers in the Union Cabinet. We've heard from the Finance Minister too. And now I want to go across to get a perspective from a man who's been there, done that 9 times over. Mr. Chidambaram, welcome to India Today. I want to start by asking you the government's critique of where you left the Indian economy 10 years of the UPA and where they're leaving the economy. They're saying basically that in the last year when you presented the interim budget, you took 35,000 crore rupees off the budget books, basically trying to do some kind of financial jiggery-pokery, creating problems for later, whereas they're being conservative, they're being clean, they're being clear, and they're being transparent. They're saying you are taking liabilities off the books, they're leaving things far better than anticipated. Instead of a 5.9% fiscal deficit, 5.8 this year, expected to come down to 5.1%. That's their big message. As former finance minister, what's your reading of this interim budget? Mr. Chidambaram, welcome.
You're trotting out numbers without verifying them. What was the fiscal deficit in the terminal year of the UPA and in the terminal year of the NDA? Ask those numbers and look at those numbers 4.5 versus 5.8.
4.5.
What was the growth rate in the terminal year of the UPA, and what is the growth rate in the terminal year of the NDA? More or less the same. What was the average growth rate in 10 years of UPA and 10 years of NDA? If you ask inconvenient questions, the government will say, we had a pandemic, but don't you remember that we had an international financial crisis? That was also once in a century. The last equal financial crisis was in the Great Depression of 1923. Therefore, these are excuses. You hide inconvenient numbers. Let a white paper be returned by an independent body, not the Niti Aayog or the expenditure department of the Ministry of Finance. Let a white paper be written by a small body of international experts on India, and let us see whose performance is better. I'm not denying that there is no performance in the NDA government, but the NDA's habit of saying everything in the UPA was black, that India got independence only in 2014, and India got economic independence only when the Honorable Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman became finance minister. All that is, according to me, something to be stated to be rejected.
So far, a large part of the growth was coming from capital expenditure by the government in infrastructure projects. This year, however, the government anticipates that the private investment green shoots that we're seeing could pick up even further. You saw the IMF's global macroeconomic outlook. The Indian economy at this time powering 16% of global growth. Would you accept that given all that's happening internationally, the Indian economy seems to be on a very steady glide path for good growth?
Good. I congratulate you on being the one-eyed monarch of the blind. If you want to be the one-eyed monarch of the blind, enjoy yourself. But look at capital expenditure. Look at the 23-24 performance. On the capital account, you promised to spend 10,961 crore, but you actually spent only 9,50,246 crore. It's a good 50,000 crore less on capital expenditure. And where did it happen? It happened at the state's level of capital expenditure. Why? I've spoken to the Finance Minister of Kerala. I've spoken to the former Finance Minister of Tamil Nadu, who was Finance Minister until a few months ago. It's because of the conditionalities that you put that states are not able to spend on capital expenditure. So overall capital expenditure in the current year is 50,000 crore less, not more. So you did not achieve your target of capital expenditure, and that's not a performance that deserves marks.
Sir, given the fact that we have an election coming up a few weeks from now, and you've been finance minister heading into polls, the obvious impulse for any government that's election bound would have been to open the purse strings, roll out the populist red carpet. To her credit, Finance Minister Sitharaman and Prime Minister Modi have eschewed being excessively populist heading into elections. Do you think that conveys a sense of confidence? You know, she said we'll be back in July, we'll present a roadmap for a Viksit Bharat, that they're so convinced that they're coming back to power that they, unlike 2019 when you won 3 states in the Hindi heartland, here they're not feeling the political pressure, therefore they know they don't need to do anything radical, dramatic or overly populist.
Apparently you have short memories. The interim budget was presented by Dr. Manmohan Singh in the terminal budget was presented by him in 95-96. Did he splurge in this last budget? Similarly, other interim budgets have been presented subsequently. Did I splurge in my last budget? Although I was away from the finance ministry for 4 years, I came back in the terminal year. Did we splurge in the last budget? You should not take the word of the government at face value, whether it's our government or BJP government or any other government. You should question every statement. That is the job of the media. I am happy that they did not splurge. But that is consistent with past practice also. All right, in 1 or 2 cases, they may have splurged. Or in 1 or 2 interim budgets, the finance minister of the day may have announced a few things which he either cannot keep or does not intend to keep. But look at the budget speech here. The budget speech promises a whole lot of things, which involves huge expenditure. In the last 10 pages or so, if you will see, starting from page, we don't have hard copies, but the whole section on promoting investments, above that, come to paragraph.
Okay.
57 onwards. 57 onwards, she has promised grand projects. Look at paragraph 59. A corpus of rupees 1 lakh crore will be established with 50-year interest-free loan for tech-savvy youth. Do they have 1 lakh crore? Next one. A new scheme will be launched for strengthening deep tech technologies for defense purposes. Where is the outlay for that? Then next one, 61. Building on the massive tripling of infrastructure, the outlay for the next year has been increased by 11.1%. And do you know the number? Do you know the number? It's an amazing number.
So it's 11 lakh, 11,000, 1111 crores.
11,111 crore. Is it based on hard calculation or is it astrological inspiration?
No, but sir, numerology aside, won't you accept that if the government is to spend money, then this is, so you would accept fully well that this is where the highest multiplier in the economy is. If the government is to spend its money, spending it on public infrastructure projects is possibly the best way with the highest multiplier for the government to be deploying its scarce resources rather than on wasteful expenses.
No. I am on a different point. You are diverting or you're ignoring it. What is this 11,111 crore?
I'll ask the finance minister that when I get a chance.
What is the rationale for arriving at that number? Obviously,
it's a shub. It's probably a shub number. That's the only thing that it can be. Number. They probably think it's a lucky number. It could be lucky for the Indian economy, probably.
You can't say that. You can't say that. You are scared to say that. Please, I don't expect you to say that because you are the media, the by and large tamed media. But I'm saying it on your television. This 11,111 crore is an astrologically inspired, invented number. Now, you please ask your next question and I'll answer that.
No, but my question, sir, was on if there is to be an enhancement in government expenditure, would you not accept that this is the best manner in which that money can be spent on public infrastructure projects rather than on wasteful expenditure or just dole-outs? Despite going into an election year and all the pressure about freebies or reveries of the kind that we saw in opposition manifestos, the government says if we invest productively. If we spend money, let it have the highest multiplier for the economy.
Who's denying that? Every government spends on capital expenditure, but I've already pointed out that this government spent less than what was budgeted capital expenditure. Now look at the quality of expenditure. the quality of expenditure, railway officials have put out this data. They are sacrificing or cutting back on ordinary trains containing second-class compartments, unreserved compartments. Huge number of trains have been taken off the system, and they are investing in Tejas, Vande Bharat, Namo Bharat, which is largely used by the middle class or the upper middle class. I have no quarrel with that. But why are you cutting back on the essential transportation of the poor? That's the question that must be answered. Why are you investing a huge amount of money in a bullet train where several people, several routes, there is massive overcrowding in the trains which run locally or in the backward areas, which is used by the poor people? See, I think, Rahul, you should do a split screen on your television showing what the poor people use and what the so-called the very rich or the better off sections do.
But Mr. Chidambaram, on a recent flight back from Bhopal, I had the opportunity to ask the Railways Minister this question about bullet trains. His logic and the government's answer is that, we need to have the audacity to think big. When the Bombay-Ahmedabad corridor comes, Bombay-Ahmedabad-Surat become one industrial corridor, it will not just be the money spent on the railway infrastructure, it will have a massive ripple effect in enhancing the economy of that entire zone. They're saying, we're thinking big. The UPA government thought small, incremental. Therefore, India never had a big vision. Therefore, they're talking about Viksit Bharat by 2047. At least that's their pitch and effort.
Wrong again. After Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji announced the Golden Quadrilateral, between 2004 and 2014, the massive build-up of the national highway was under the UPA government. Since then, of course, 2014 to 24, this government has also increased the length of the national highway. There are some problems there. They are counting, they are double counting. The one way is counted as 1 kilometer and the return track is counting as a 2nd kilometer. But ignore all that. But between 2004 and I'm not claiming we started Golden Quadrilateral. Golden Quadrilateral was started by Vajpayee's government. But who built the national highways for 10 years between 2004 and 2014? Why don't you measure those national highways? Who tried various models for building national highway? Did this government come and retrospectively build the highways in the previous 10 years?
Okay.
I've heard of retrospective law. I've not heard of retrospective road building.
We leave it there for the time being. That's Mr. Chidambaram, 9-time finance minister. 9-time he's presented the budget, giving his critique of the 6th budget of Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. Thank you very much, Mr. Chidambaram, for joining us with your thoughts. To get a response of how the government is looking at what we just heard from the opposition and from Mr. Chidambaram, I want to go across to Senior Minister in the Union Cabinet, Rajiv Chandrasekhar, now joins us, Minister of State for Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. Thank you very much, Mr. Chandrasekhar, for joining us. Now, let's take you through what the opposition is saying and get you to respond to the critique that we're hearing of the budget. One, and I'll just have that graph up on the screen, that while there's a lot of emphasis on public infrastructure, so public infrastructure getting a lot of emphasis, but as a percentage of GDP, the amount of money that we're spending, the percentage of money as a part of the GDP that we're spending on education and on health is coming down. They're saying that this represents the priorities of the government, that softer development indices are not getting that kind of priority as much as hard physical infrastructure. How do you respond to that? Minister Chandrasekhar, welcome.
No, Rahul, I certainly don't want to get drawn into this this absolutely nonsensical debate from the Congress party in particular and their UPA-INDI alliance in general, because Look, what we have done for the last 10 years is a sharp contrast to what they have done in their UPA lost decade between 4 and 2014. And I heard, bits and pieces of what the former finance minister was trying to spin. Look, the fundamental point today in 2024, as the people evaluate 10 years of Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji and the 10 years of the Congress before that, is the following. The Congress UPA inherited, by their own admission in 2004 July, by the same worthy gentleman who was waxing eloquent before me, an economy that was robust, that was in growth, had huge reserves, and was almost a surplus budget. They took that performance, they took the programs of Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee, including the Golden Quadrilateral, increasing spending on infrastructure, and ruined the economy, left the economy and the financial sector and the investment space ruined by 2014. There is no arguing about that. These are facts. And I'm glad today the finance minister has said we will publish a white paper. Instead of constantly being sniped at with data out of context and information out of context, it is important for the people of India to understand really what the UPA and the Congress did in the 10 years that they had the opportunity to serve the people. And what really has happened in the last 10 years, taking a devastated economy in 2014, an absolutely broken financial sector which was beset with NPAs and crony lending, with no investments running away from this country, inflation sky high, to rebuild the economy and to take it from the fragile 5 where we were in 2014 to take it to the top 5 and really create a launch pad of economic expansion into the future is what Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji has done. And that is what this interim budget is about. Whether the Congress appreciates whether what we are doing in education, or the Congress wants to measure the amount of outlay that is being provided to one social sector or the other sector, I can certainly tell you, I can give you chapter and verse on how state governments of the Congress have dragged the national average down on employment, on social indices, on women's safety. Rajasthan under the Congress, Karnataka under the Congress, Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh under the Congress, how they drag these national averages down. This is an interesting game that the Congress plays. They love bandying national averages without wanting people to understand who's actually the drain and the drag on the national average, which is states that they are in government in. So I don't want to get drawn into this, Rahul. The facts are out there. Yeah.
Mr. Chandrasekhar, the other thing I want to draw you into is a 10-year comparison of the economic performance of the Modi government versus that of the UPA government. Mr. Chidambaram said, look at fiscal deficit. We left at 4.5%, it's now 5.8%. He said, look at growth. As an average for 5 years, we grew faster in UPA 2 than we've grown now. They'll give the example of the pandemic, but we had the economic crisis in the US in the late 2000s, and therefore, his argument is, if you look at 10 years, it's not as if the UPA didn't perform. In your arguments, he alleges that the government makes it seem as if the UPA did nothing and they're the ones who are building India afresh.
Look, nobody is saying that. I don't know why he's so deeply insecure that he believes that that's the characterization. What the UPA did was unprecedented scams. What the UPA did was break the financial sector that was left to them by Atal Bihari Vajpayee's government in sound shape. What they did was shatter the economy that was given to them in very strong, high growth shape in 2004. Those are facts. I'm not creating rhetoric. And this is, Mr. Chidambaram has now moved from being a clever lawyer to an unfortunate spin master. When he talks about average growth, what is relevant is not average growth when you were left a high growth economy in 2004. It is what you leave the country with at the end of your term. And they left an economy that was in tatters at the end of the term. And Rahul, all you need to do is go back to 2014, do a Google of all the headlines that describe the economy under Chidambaram ji's watch. It was laggard economy, investment decline, high inflation. I am not saying this. You just have to Google and get a view on what the economy was when Finance Minister Chidambaram was the so-called caretaker of the economy. So this type of spinning, trying to spin our average growth was great. If the average growth was great under the Congress, they must thank Mr. Jaswant Singh, who was the finance minister, and Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who was the prime minister. And if we had to start, Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji had to start in 2014 with a very, very low base, high inflation, low growth, and a shattered financial sector. We have to thank Finance Minister Chidambaram for it. So these are facts. So no amount of spinning and twisting and turning in the wind will change what the facts are. The economy today in 2024 is poised for unprecedented expansion.
The other thing I want you to respond to is his charge, and borne out by the data, that in the last few months of this fiscal, expenditure has been cut back on capital expenditure, on several of the social outlay schemes. The expenditure has been cut back, which is how instead of ending up at 5.9% fiscal, you're at 5.8, not because of great buoyancy, but because you haven't spent what you'd allocated, cutting across different sectors and different schemes, which is how you've been able to show 5.8% fiscal deficit.
Once, and Rahul, I didn't complete this so-called charge of Mr. Chidambaram that our fiscal deficit is very high compared to his fiscal deficit. His fiscal deficit was almost 9%. And even that he managed after cleverly fudging data, and we know this. He knows it. And if he wants to be drawn into a debate on this, we are more than happy to have a debate on what he did to fudge the oil deficit and by stuffing the numbers in the oil marketing company. So I don't want to go down that road. But for somebody today of his caliber and his knowledge to start talking about the fiscal deficit, knowing fully well the world just went through the black swan event of an unprecedented kind during COVID, where 2 years this had a huge, deep impact on economic activity, trade, exports, imports, all of that happened. And he wants us to just believe that that will not have any consequence on the economy and the deficit. Of course, revenues came down for the government, as it did for every government around the world. Of course, the government had to borrow more, as did every government in the world. And of course, fiscal deficit went up during the COVID, as did for every reasonable, responsible government in the world who was responsible enough to look after their people, protect their people with vaccines, protect their people with free rations. This is what a responsible government does. So, I mean, he gives you half the facts and wants people to believe that he ran a superlative economy, when the facts and the truth are exactly the opposite. So, and on the issue of whether we spend enough or not, Rahul, spending efficiency today in the Narendra Modi ji government, a 1 rupee travels further than ever before in the history of independent India. Under Chidambaram ji, spending 1 rupee meant 85 paise was siphoned out by somebody, and 15 paise was went to the intended beneficiary. Under Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, that 1 rupee that is meant goes 1 rupee to the beneficiary. So what is he talking about? For us, it is not about numbers, it is about the outcomes. And governance is about outcomes, it's not about measuring how many million crore of rupees that was spent. In any event, you can see in Karnataka, you can see in Jharkhand how the crores of rupees that are coming out of the contractors and the MLAs' houses in Congress-run governments or INDI alliance-run governments. And he wants us to believe that that is a measure of fiscal performance. Certainly not. I think the people of India realize it is outcomes and how you spend and how honestly you spend, and the corruption-free governance that is behind every rupee meant for a beneficiary. That is the more important measure than saying, I am a finance minister that has presided over 2G scam, Colgate scam, denied these scams ever existed, and then make a case to spend more and more money as and loot it like state governments in Karnataka and Jharkhand are doing.
You've had your say. Mr. Chidambaram presented his critique. Rajiv Chandrasekhar ji for joining us. Thank you very much. Appreciate you taking our time and joining us for this conversation. Several more guests joining me in the next few minutes. I want to go across to Dr. Subhash Garg, who's been part of the budget making process for many years. And this is one of the key areas of argument. 10 years of UPA versus 10 years of NDA. Mr. Chidambaram arguing that, there was a lot that got done, and the government trying to disparage the performance under the UPA to make it seem as if nothing happened. And you just heard from Minister Chandrasekhar, as we will from several others in the government, who will say, well, frankly, those 10 years were 10 years of a lost opportunity.
See, it's very good to compare because that's what gives you a long-term sense of how India has developed over the years and performed. Minister Rajiv was talking about Atal Bihari Vajpayee's government and then subsequent movement into the UPA government at that time. I would recall for you, if you go back, Atal Bihari Vajpayee government 2003-04 was a very good, outstanding year. That's what gave birth to the Shining India movement, because at 8%, for the first time we had recorded the real GDP growth of 8%. But again, please remember, before that 2003-04, 3 years of Vajpayee government had very low growth, only about 4% or so. And for the entire 6-year period of Vajpayee government, the growth was only about 5.5%. It was not very massive growth. When you went into the UPA, the economy was super hot in the first few years. The growth recorded by the numbers or the series which we had at that time was 8% plus for 2-3 years together. And the first UPA government of 5 years, the growth performance was excellent. Even inflation performance was very low those time, and that was the only year 2007-08 when there was revenue surplus in the country. But by the time after the global financial crisis and the missteps which the government had taken at that time of sort of splurging on expanding expenditures, coupled with the misfortune of two things at that time. One was the global rise in agricultural prices, and also the oil prices went through the roof at that time for 2 years. By the time the cycle turned only just when the new government took over.
So it's a mix of your own actions and also a certain amount of luck which is beyond
So a lot
your
of factors play into it. I don't think you can sort of assign the entire credit or blame
the
to
truth
anyone
lies
particular.
somewhere in between, you're saying. So I want to go across to Dr. Anish Shah, Group Chairperson of Mahindra & Mahindra, joining us now on this broadcast. Dr. Shah, welcome. You know, from your perspective, how are you decoding the key takeaways from Nirmala Sitharaman's 6th budget, Dr. Shah?
Now, the key messages are that this is a budget that sets up India very well for its long-term growth ambitions around Viksit Bharat. This is a budget that prioritizes economics over politics. It is one that covers all segments of society and therefore is inclusive, but is also has a significant focus on growth and a significant focus on climate.
One of the key critiques of left-leaning economists, members of the opposition, is that rural consumption isn't picking up. In your portfolio, especially when it comes to, for example, tractors, are you still highly concerned, as you were some time ago when we last chatted, about the fact that rural consumption isn't showing any green shoots and there isn't any big spurt in rural consumption, that there seems to be some level of distress which is keeping rural consumers from spending?
So on that, Rahul, it always has to be a longer-term view, because if we look at the past 3 years, if we look specifically at the tractor industry, it has grown very well. In this current year, it's flat to -5% is what our estimate is for the year. But on balance, given the growth we've seen more recently, it's not a bad place to be. So I would say rural is not as bad as a lot of people think. It's actually in a fairly good place. We continue to be optimistic about where rural will be next year as well. And despite some of the challenges we've seen this year in terms of lower rainfall, in terms of crops not being as good as they should have been, I think rural has held up fairly well. And if we look at it from a budget standpoint, we would always prefer as an industry a budget that has sustainable long-term growth, that again prioritizes economics over politics in terms of SOPs in any particular area, and that is a very solid positive for the economy.
You know, the other question that's being asked is about jobs and unemployment and whether the budget says enough and does enough to address these two issues.
So if you drive growth in an economy, jobs automatically are a part of it because they have to be part of the growth story. And what we are seeing in this budget is a clear focus on growth, also focus on inclusion, and skilling is a key part of it as well. So all of those things, as you put it together, it will drive jobs, because without jobs, this is not going to happen.
The finance minister spoke of a roadmap for Viksit Bharat by 2047 when she comes back in July. That's the level of optimism she was seeking to convey. According to you, regardless of who wins, what does India need to do from where we are right now to actually be able to achieve that vision of a Viksit Bharat?
I think the first is one that is in the budget this time, which is around states driving ease of doing business as well. Now, many states have been doing that, but some of the incentives that have been put into this budget will accelerate that. And that's a very important part, because India stands today in a position when the world is looking at India and is looking at how can we make India our destination. And some are hesitating based on some of the challenges we've seen in India in the past. The central government has been very focused on addressing those challenges and then very aggressive in doing so in a positive way. And the states have to have that same level of aggression in terms of making things easier and attracting investors and manufacturing into India. So that, to me, is one of the biggest areas of focus, which, again, is very good to see in the budget right now. A number of reforms have taken place, and the key is going to be on continuing to drive economic growth. Manufacturing will have to be significantly higher. To reach Viksit Bharat goals, our estimate is that manufacturing will have to be 16 times what it is today. And if that has to happen, then R&D spend has to be strong, because we've got to be able to make in India for the world. Making in India for India is not going to get us to 16 times. And that, again, is something that's positive in the budget in terms of the R&D spend. So these are some of the aspects that we will have to look at in terms of driving India's economy to get to Viksit Bharat goals.
No, but if manufacturing is to go up in the way that you're suggesting, for that companies like yours and others in India Inc. need to invest a lot more. The government's capex is up only 11% this year. The government is hoping that private investment will take off in right earnest. In all the conversations that you're having at FICCI, do you actually see that happen, or do you think once again there'll be more talk but less action and less actual investment?
Clearly, private investment has to grow, and our capacity utilization has been going up. A number of businesses have deleveraged their balance sheets and are in a much better position today. The consumption story is strong in India. We are starting to make in India for the world as well in a few sectors. And if you put all of those together, that will result in private investment growing. You're right, that has been a softer spot in the last 2 or 3 years. And that's where government capex has helped the economy grow. And it is time for the private sector to step up and invest and continue to drive the economy as well.
That's Dr. Anish Shah, Group Chief Executive Officer at the Mahindra Group, joining us. Thank you very much for taking our time. Rajiv Kumar is now back with us, all suited, booted, looking very sharp. Dr. Kumar, welcome. You know, this conversation that we're having, Chidambaram versus the likes of Rajiv Chandrasekhar on 10 years of UPA versus 10 years of Modi, the fact is that we're heading into an election cycle. So this narrative will likely play out. The problem, though, is that both are trying to diss the other. Who do you think, in your analysis, at the end of 10 years is actually carrying the day? Who's winning the economic argument?
Well, I'm clear in my mind that the present government is winning the economic argument, because what happened, for whatever reasons they were, and and we can go into that. I think we today have landed ourselves in a fairly sweet spot, and for various reasons, for all the reforms that have been done, etc., etc. Now, good policies.
No, but Chidambaram said, compare 10 years of my growth, compare 10 years of NDA growth. Look at fiscal deficit where I left it, look at where they're leaving. He says, talk numbers and the picture isn't as rosy as someone like you would say.
No, but you see, the fact is that the Chidambaram, when he made his budget for 2009, I actually told him himself, he had just opened the coffers completely. I mean, the write-off, the debt write-offs of the farmers, the six pay commission, etc., etc. The fiscal deficit at that time, I think, jumped up by 1.8 if I remember correctly. Because I mentioned to him, I said, sir, what have you done? And he said, don't tell me how to do economics. This is the way to do it. See, the point is that there were some good lucks there, and there was also some bad luck. For example, at the end of during the 2013, I think this is what Subhash was referring to, we did end up in a situation. We were really at the precipice of, at the edge of a precipice, and that was the fragile five and the rupee tanking, etc., etc. Similar things, I'm afraid, were done out by Shri Pranab Mukherjee as well. After the 2008 crisis, the kind of response that we had on...
Especially retrospective taxation, who can forget that?
Retrospective taxation. I mean, and the tax rates, the non-transparencies, the kind of, sort of thing that were going on in the last mile delivery, the public procurement, the tendering and all of that. You see, the numbers, yes, if you take just the averages, but again here, maybe the GDP or average growth rate, etc., whatever. But the point is, my own thinking is that the foundations for a sustained takeoff of 7% plus growth have now been laid. Now, maybe again, one is wrong. We've had this conversation that India is land of perpetual takeoffs, but I think it's beginning to happen.